Morning. I always find it hard to believe when we reach the end of the fall season with Thanksgiving vacation just about upon us. On the one hand, the time seems to fly by, and I have a clear memory of welcoming a number of you and your parents and guardians to the school for the first time right here in chapel the day after Labor Day. On the other hand, our class trip day during our first full week of classes, which ended with the gas issues that this area continues to rebuild from, feels like a long time ago. So over the course of the 10 weeks that have elapsed since Labor Day, we've done well, in my view. We've worked hard in the classroom, teachers and students alike, with a fair amount of that hard work culminating this week in the form of tests, papers, and assessments. We have had scores of admission visitors here whose experience has been enriched by tours so many of you have given. We've enjoyed Lehman exhibits and visiting artists sharing their work and talent with us through the fall. We've had a great time with a wide array of weekend activities the CAB pulls together on Saturday nights and Sundays. I've tried to learn a lot of names and continue to work at it while giving out Brooks Bucks, $5 at a time, 175 and counting, so keep asking me. We've opened the most impressive Center for the Arts in New England, with visual art, music, and theater classes all taking up residence, and with an excellent first school meeting under our belts. More to come. Stories from Afar christened the Black Box Theater on Friday evening, and we even managed to have a glow dance, whatever that means, in the space just over a week ago. We'll celebrate the Chipotle Challenge tonight, along with some great environmental stewardship ideas for the school's consideration, 5:30 in the Frick for those who are coming. Our classical concert will be in the theater to perform before what I hope will be a full house tomorrow night at 7:30. Our varsity field hockey team completed an undefeated season and won the ISL championship for the first time in 13 years. And along with the boys' soccer team, they will host first-round New England tournament action tomorrow, Wednesday afternoon, I should say, a doubleheader for 2 more Brooks School wins, no doubt. This misses a lot, I realize, underlining the fact that we have poured ourselves into the school's life through these 10 weeks. We've done well. As we head in the direction of some time away from school, with the Thanksgiving holiday encouraging us to consider what we should be thankful for in our lives, and as Mr. Konovalchuk pointed out, gather here the day after Veterans Day, I find myself moved to think about those who serve and have served in this country's armed forces. Yesterday marked the 100th anniversary of the armistice that ended World War I, and I received this short video clip from a Brooks alum, Richard Spencer, class of 1972, and current Secretary of the Navy, commenting on what we should have in mind on Veterans Day. Here it is.
100 years ago, the guns fell silent across Europe on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. The armistice which ended World War I finally ended the most horrific warfare the world had ever seen, and the world began its slow march to recovery that continues to this day. We remember this war on November 11th, and we remember the toll it took on nations across Europe and in every corner of the globe. But here in the United States, we also use this day as an opportunity to remember those brave young Americans who left their homes and families to fight, as the popular song went, over there. They laid their lives on the line to people they'd never ever seen, in far-off countries they'd never been. And they made the critical difference which helped bring the fighting to a close. This was not the first time American troops had gone overseas to the aid of another nation, nor would it be the last. Throughout the 20th century and into the 21st, it was American sailors, Marines, soldiers, airmen, and Coast Guardsmen who stepped forward to defend the freedom in World War II, Korea, Vietnam, the Gulf, Afghanistan, Iraq, and many other challenges around the globe. And so on November 11th, we honor them as well. The 11th day of the 11th month marks not just the anniversary of one war where American troops made the difference, but a day to remember all of the generations of warriors that came before them and after. We know this as Veterans Day. And this Veterans Day, I hope you'll join me in thanking someone who served, whether mother, father, brother, sister, aunt, uncle, neighbor, or friend. And also remember those who still keep the watch and stand guard for freedom on this very day. Take a moment not only to thank them, but ask them to share with you why they chose to defend global safety and security. We owe them a debt that can never fully be repaid, but which always must be remembered.
I do not often dive deeply into the far reaches of the school's history when speaking in chapel, but today's reading by Lamy was shared in this very space on June 2nd, 1946, by Mr. Ashburn, at a service remembering the 12 Brooksians who died in World War II. I've noted before, and will likely note again, our school's commitment to remembering well. The commitment to doing so began with Mr. Ashburn, of course. In 15 classes, the Brooks War Record, 1932 to 1946, the title of a book he was central to writing, underlines that commitment. In it, you will find Mr. Ashburn's characteristic eloquence. He was an extraordinary writer and speaker. His remarks from the service are included. The heart of the book, however, centers on the 12 Brooksians who died in World War II, with remembrances offered by Mr. Ashburn and some of his colleagues. There's much from the book that I have read and then read again, and I've tried to imagine the weight and anguish of one service aiming to remember 12 students all at once. Just think about that for a moment. 12 students from 7 different classes, all dying while serving this country over a 4-year stretch of time. It's hard to fathom and leaves me feeling a profound sense of responsibility to carry forward Mr. Ashburn's commitment to remembering them. In ways, this is not that difficult, as we've done well to capture and hold on to their names all over campus. In other ways, the pace we keep and fullness of our lives does not allow for all that much time to slow down and really see what is around us. It strikes me on Veterans Day that as we come and go in this Ashburn Chapel and all over our beautiful campus, we pass names of Brooksians all the time. The names are there for us to remember them. The names have become part of our vocabulary in some cases because we use them to identify spaces on our campus. They emerge during graduation weekend in different ways. They adorn buildings we live in. They are in both prominent and obscure locations on campus. And while they are not all names of people who served in the armed forces, many of them are. And to illuminate these names and what adorns this chapel on this day is important. I want to start with the flag that is now encased above the entryway behind all of us, right above where Mr. McVeigh is standing. I suspect some of you might know what that flag commemorates, but it's possible many of you don't. There were only 294 students in the first 15 classes to graduate from Brooks, all boys, between 1932 and 1946. 248 of them served in the Army, Navy, or Marines. That's more than 84%, and the equivalent would mean that about 312 of you would be headed for one of these branches of the military at some point in the relatively near future. It's incredible when I think about it. The flag there has 261 stars on it, which includes 13 additional students who served in government during the war effort in the 1940s. 249 of them are blue stars, rising from the bottom of the flag to the top as we look at it, and then 12 gold stars at the top in memory of the 12 students the school recalled on June 2nd, 1946. With great pride, Mr. Ashburn noted, and I quote, "I do not believe that any educational institution had a more honorable record or a higher percentage of its graduates in national service, end quote. At the end of the pews on my right here, and your left, I suppose, are 3 beautiful wooden tablets that now hold the names of 16 Brooks School students who died while serving this country. The first 2 tablets, as you work into that last pew, all died in World War II. Some of the names are familiar to us. All of them should be read and remembered. You will hear Thomas Perkins Brooks Jr.'s name at our lawn ceremony in the spring. He died in the Battle of Leyte Gulf, and a prize we present every year bears his name. I hope you will pause at the crossing on the upper level of the Center for the Arts and take a moment to read the tablet remembering Stephen Metcalf Danforth. He died over northern France in 1943. The tablet was removed from the Danforth room before construction began and will remain where it is now, along with his picture and a picture of the room for all time. William Ward Frick II is perhaps the name we use most. I hope when the 6th form leaves this morning to collect a snack after chapel, they will pause at the fireplace and read what's on the wall above. The Frick, as we know it, honors him. Fletcher Ladd Gill Jr., he died in an air battle in the Pacific Theater in March 1944. Lawrence Cushing Goodhue Jr., he left school voluntarily at the end of his 5th form year to enlist. Think about that. Robert Ross Hotz was a pilot who enlisted on December 8, 1941, the day after the Pearl Harbor attacks. He died while flying a combat mission over New Guinea in 1944. David Lapsley, he died in 1944 when serving as a radio operator on a military transport plane that was damaged. He knew it was going to crash, yet remained at his post and handed out parachutes to passengers. Oliver Ames Parker, he was a pilot, died when his plane faltered on a training mission landing in 1943. James Neil Thorne, our largest dormitory, bears his name and that of his brother Peter, who also died far too young. Thorne House was built as a permanent memorial to the two of them. When James could not get into the American Air Force, he pursued service as a member of the Royal Air Force. He was shot down over Holland in September 1944. Richard Mortimer Tuckerman, he died of complications related to a severe case of malaria he contracted while serving in the China-India-Burma Theater in 1945. When Gardner House was organized differently, a dormitory within the building was named in his memory. Peter Van Pelt, he was killed in action in France in August 1944, following D-Day and the Allied push against the Nazis across Europe. A tablet remembering and picture of DeForest Van Slyke Jr. hangs on the wall in what was the original school library and now serves as a history classroom at the end of the hallway in the basement of Gardner. He was a decorated pilot, flew 37 missions over southeastern Europe, and was shot down over what was Yugoslavia in July 1944. I'm certain that Mr. Ashburn hoped on June 2nd, 1946, that a 3rd tablet would never be necessary for the school. Yet 4 additional Brooksians have died since World War II while serving this country. The 3rd tablet holds their names. William Stewart Barr died while serving in Colombia in 1965. There's a plaque remembering him right over there. I do not know the particulars surrounding his death, but do know that he grew up at Brooks, as his father was a faculty member here, and his brother, Laurie, who recently passed, always came to this chapel first to see the plaque remembering Billy, as he called him. George Whitney Carpenter died while serving as a Marine in Vietnam in 1967. He was inducted posthumously into the Athletic Hall of Fame 10 years ago at what would have been his 45th reunion. He earned a Bronze Star, and of him Mr. Ashburn wrote, and I quote, Few are given, in less than 21 years, the devotion and admiration George Carpenter received. Everyone who knew him loved him. He was the idol of younger boys at school, the unquestioned first among his peers, end quote. My winter term class always makes a point of finding his name on the Vietnam Memorial, and there is a plaque remembering him on the stone fire pit on the hill by the boathouses. Peter Thomas Nicholson died in a training accident in 2004. He was a career Marine. I did not know him, but I've heard him recalled as a deeply revered and admired student and person. At the time of his death, I remember a former colleague, who a number of my current colleagues will recall, Ray Broadhead, sharing news of Peter's death in a voice that was cracking. Ask Miss Perkins or Dusty about him. George Alexius Whitney was remembered in this chapel at a service 2 years ago this January that I will never forget. He was killed in Afghanistan in December 2016. He's the only student I knew who has died in service to his country, and I hope that forever remains the case. There's a star on the wall at CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, remembering him, and he was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery earlier this year. He served in Iraq and Afghanistan with both the Marine Corps and CIA. Ask Mr. Konovalchuk about him. Before closing, I'd offer 3 more thoughts. First, if I've learned anything in getting to know a number of veterans through a winter term course I will teach for an 8th time this January, it is that war is horrific and tragic. This doesn't speak to legitimate debate about war's necessity, but I've not ever met anyone who has experienced war who doesn't describe it that way. It is no accident that Secretary Spencer's email to me, including a link to the video we just watched, finished with him writing, "Keep the peace. Those who know war abhor it." Second, I cannot help but think of all of you when recalling these 16 young men who died while serving. While they combed their hair somewhat differently, they wore different clothes, you have far more in common with them than you do not. They played hockey. They acted in the annual play. They were school prefects. One earned the same Russell Prize a member of the class of 2019 will earn this year. They were respected and admired because they were fair. One was a senior prefect, just like JD and Connor. They played football. They were in the first boat on this same lake. They were in the choir. They played the violin. They were noisy as 4th formers. They were leaders. They played lacrosse. They were dormitory prefects. They were good examples and exemplary citizens. They were great kids. You have this school in common with all of them, and they were you in so many ways. Finally, I also think about your teachers, my colleagues, and what so many of them would write about if we were to lose one of you in this way. You would be remembered in much the same way, with words from advisors, teachers, coaches, and dormitory parents who believe in you, who admire you, who choose this school because of you. Mr. Kay's words at Alexi Whitney's service are a case in point. It is important that you know that. Mr. Ashburn shared the following in his remarks on June 2nd, 1946, and I quote, "It is with great hesitation that I speak today. I am aware of presences in the chapel, friends among friends. In that mood, I think we are gathered. We were friends here together, some of us more than friends. In my mind's eye, as in yours, each name I read becomes a living person. I see him, as so often before, in this chapel, hear his voice, watch him in some familiar activity. It is idle to pretend that there is no room for grief. These whom we remember today were lovely and pleasant in their lives. It is good to remember them." End quote. In so doing, we honor what the 3 tablets in the back read across the top. and what Mr. Ashburn hoped for, and I quote, "The trustees placed these tablets here that these names may be remembered with gratitude for their sacrifice," end quote. I hope you all have a great week and a great break, mindful of all we have to be thankful for. Thank you.